right now. So let's go and give him a call and get him on into the show. And we'll talk about Myles Brennan with him. We'll talk about Myles and see what he's hearing, because I know that he's here. We were talking about it this morning, y'all. We're talking about it this morning. All right, let's get Mr. Mike Scarborough in here, and we'll get to some of these comments. I wish they would rotate Devonta Lee at linebacker, at least some. I agree with that. Blake, next weekend.
Hello?
Mr. Mike Scarborough, what's happening, brother?
Oh, nothing, man. Just waiting on you to call.
I'm sorry. I'm a minute late. Please forgive me, sir.
No, you're good, man.
All right, Mike, we're going to jump on into it. We greatly appreciate it. Mike Scarborough from Tigerbait.com is our guest. Mike, to start the show, the pretty much everything that's going on, obviously, is LSU-Florida game being postponed. But a lot of what we were talking about here earlier is Myles Brennan obviously being hurt per Ed Orgeron. Some of the rumors that are going around what's going on with Myles. I guess give it to us, man. What are you hearing around? I know what we know about the game, but what are you hearing about Myles?
Yeah, I've heard all the rumors out there: ankles, hips. Orgeron says just really bruised up. Was questionable or doubtful for Saturday's game if it was going to be played, and so we'll see. I always. After seeing somebody several years ago say that a player's arm might have to be amputated, I think it's always best to wait for an official release on if it's something actually significant.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mike,
but
go ahead.
No,
go ahead.
I look. It's you see what's going on with COVID and. With the way LSU's defense is played, this is look. You want everybody to be healthy. You don't want all them Florida folks to have COVID. You want them to get healthy. But the timing of this is a great thing for LSU. It gives them an extra week to get that defense coached up and use it to your advantage. And as someone who's out in the field and going to high school games and I'm actually enjoying the late start. The cooler weather has been nice. So we're going to have a December football game, and I wonder what the temperatures typically are mid-December in Gainesville.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that's a really good point, Mike, that I hadn't really thought about. And look, that game being rescheduled into December the 12th, I think you're going to have maybe some fair weather. So that's a good point that I didn't even think about.
No, yeah, look, I'm out every Thursday and Friday night, and I'm talking to high school coaches, and it's like, there's always some little things that between how coaches operate, things that they learn through COVID, the ways they use Zoom. There's a lot of things that have been learned through having to do things in different ways. And the high school coaches that I talked to have loved the late start. You don't, but what I found odd was 2 weeks ago, you still had a bunch of kids having dehydration issues. We went and filmed Le'Veon Moss from Estruma, and he was having hydration problems. And so I think some kids learned that, even though the forecast is 68 degrees, that doesn't mean you can get away with not drinking all the fluids you're supposed to for 2 days before.
Right. Well, look, and you've covered LSU recruiting and recruiting just in general for a long time, and that's why people love you, Mike. So let's hypothetically play devil's advocate, and then we'll play what we may be more realistic around this quarterback position for LSU. Now, I know that you study a lot of TJ Finley. I know you study a lot of Max Johnson. If Myles Brennan is out for a while, what do you foresee of those two quarterbacks moving forward for this LSU team this season?
Man, I hate it that and that was a concern all off season. Could Myles Brennan take a hit? How durably was he? Because the last thing you wanted was a true freshman being thrown into action. Is a true freshman, and that's even compounded worse now because LSU has been in dogfights for most of these games. None of those guys have had any real playing time, none to speak of. And it's a SEC only schedule. So there's no UT San Antonio. There's no getting a quarter against, Nicholls State or anything like that. So look, if it's going to be Max Johnson or it's going to be Finley, I think it is probably Max Johnson. But Orgeron says that they're splitting the reps. Look, I think that those guys can do it, but you just never know how a true freshman's going to react. Well, once there's a bad play, or if there's any, how they take the pressure. If there's some bad plays, are they able to bounce back from it? Mm-hmm. We'll see. But I hope Myles Brennan is ready to go. And, I'm always looking forward because I think this season is really just a big mulligan season. And,
right.
And, look, the numbers Myles Brennan has put up, and last week you couldn't ask him to have done any more. Certainly there's some plays he'd like back, and particularly on that last series, but still, I'm anxious to see what next spring football is going to look like when Nussmeier is there and how that plays out.
Well, Mike, he's looked damn good. Garrett Nussmeier, the 4-star, 5-star quarterback, whatever rating he's got at the current moment, I guess, out of Texas, the LSU commit. Mike, you threw Garrett Nussmeier in there, so it kind of made me think. LSU struggled in the first 3 weeks. They're 1-2. In your experience, how is that affecting recruiting right now? So obviously the big worry from fans, I think a lot of times when you slip up in a couple of games, well, man, we lost to Mississippi State. Man, we lost to Missouri. That's going to kill us in recruiting. What really goes on? Do recruits really look at that or not?
Well, the 21 cake is baked, in my opinion. And the guys that are still, outstanding that haven't made a decision yet, those are all kids that I think when they see what the issues are at LSU, they see an opportunity. Mm-hmm. I think then you have the commitments that are already committed see an opportunity. I mean, what does Landon Jackson and Savion Jones think? How quick that they can come and see the field when LSU needs a definite pass rushing guys because we like what we see out of Allie Gay, but you need more than that. You need some on the other side. Corey Foreman and Mason Smith see that there's a real opportunity there. The one thing about a 4-3 and talking to Marlon Favorite earlier in the week for a story I keep I'm trying to get out as soon as I can. He talks about the difference in what your linemen are needed to do in a 4-3 versus a 3-4. And look, Neil Farrell, Glenn Logan, those are all good guys. Ika, but you need some guys that you're projecting to be early round draft picks in a 4-3 because those guys have to get pressure. They have to be marquee. It's no longer a deal where you just need guys there that are middle of the road guys because your linebackers are so fantastic and they're the ones that are expected to make all the plays. In a 4-3, it's a whole different animal. Mm-hmm. So there's no Glenn Dorsey's is what I'm getting at, which was what Pelini was working with when he was at LSU the first time.
Mike, I talked about this last night, and two things I said, and I want to see if you agree with me. I said, number one, winning covers a multitude of sins. Right, this defense last year was not that great at times. Now, at times they did some really good stuff, but last year they weren't good at times either. John Rice probably just scored another touchdown on LSU, and also I don't know if you saw this, but I posted a photo on Twitter with the entire defensive line, and something you just mentioned, we're getting completely pushed off the ball. That's not on Bo Pelini right now. So getting over to that, how do you fix that, Mike? In your opinion, how does LSU need to fix this?
I just think that they've got to come with some unique ways to rectify the situation. But there's no doubt. It's a complete perfect storm. You got to coach a new defense with a new defensive coordinator, new plan, didn't have spring football. You can do all the computer work that you want to do and talk your way through it, but there's no discounting on the field coaching and actually out there having scrimmages all through spring, and then seeing what they've digested and then coming in August and picking back up or seeing what you need to refresh and then building upon that. And then when, Tyler Shelvin opts out, what might Kerry Vincent could have brought to that defense defensive backfield that where you've got guys struggling. It's just been a perfect storm as to why LSU looks so awful on defense. And to me, it's look, the coaches are going to take the blame, and good for them. But you definitely have a personnel problem. There's just no one's been hit as hard as LSU between NFL draft, all the free agent signings, the COVID opt-outs. It's insane.
Mike, we got a question here for you from someone inside the chat. They said, #Ask Mike, what's the biggest strengths of TJ Finley and what's the biggest strengths of Max Johnson in your opinion?
Well, I think Max Johnson is a little bit more mobile than people give him credit for. Both of them are obviously big and strong kids. Both are intelligent. Finley has certainly a rocket of an arm, Jamarcus Russell-esque. It's one of those deals too with Max Johnson where he was in an offense that really didn't throw the ball a whole lot, didn't have a whole lot of receivers for his junior and senior years. So it's one of those things where we really don't know what we're seeing, what we're going to see, because neither one of those guys have had the weapons and been able to operate in that system. But I do think one thing, I don't think either one of them are as mobile as Myles Brennan. And certainly Myles Brennan isn't as mobile as Joe Burrow was. Right. And that's part of the reason why he's hurt.
We got another question from Blaine Smith. Blaine asks, #Ask Mike, how many corners will LSU end up taking this year in this year's class, in your opinion?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a big numbers problem right now when you watch this. Because when you fill in 19 through 24, you can do that real easy when you start going Brian Thomas, Sage Ryan. If you throw Corey Foreman and Tristan Lay in there, Savion Byrd, you got a couple other kids, but you can get to 24. So then you're like, okay, 25. Is that another corner? Well, you offered Matthew Langlois from Cavalcade Point Capee last Friday night.
Right.
You got neighbors at Southside and Youngsville that got an offer 2 weeks before that. Wide receiver. Michael Trigg committed to USC early in the week. So, is it? And I don't think it's going to be a second quarterback. We'll see if Cole Lord is willing to be a preferred walk-on at quarterback when he's got offers from Liberty, UL Lafayette, and others. Pacific. Texas has offered him a preferred walk-on. So, is there a second running back? Is it a fourth offensive lineman? Is it another wide receiver? And what if both Matthew Langlois and neighbors both decide to flip? Well, then you really got a number problem. And and when you look at LSU's current commitment list, how do you make it work? I'm not seeing where you shed anybody.
Yeah,
I don't see where anybody's wavering either. And believe me, and don't do like last year where you're looking at the lowest rated guy and saying, "Oh, well, when's LSU going to cut him loose?" Well, the lowest rated guy last year was Ali Gay.
Right, correct. And look, we've seen a lot of
kudos to Bill Bush. Kudos to Bill Bush and Christian Locouture for doing a whale of a job of pinpointing that kid and knowing what they had. Because
he's your best defensive lineman right now. I mean, Mike. I mean, right? I mean, he's your best D lineman right now. And it's not even close. I mean, I guess you could say B.J. Ojulari, but he's your best defensive lineman.
You're right. It's not even close. But I think Jaquelin Roy obviously has a lot of upside and is going to get better as he ages. But I also think Ali Gay has a lot of ceiling that he hasn't come close to realizing yet, which is typical of a junior college guy. But can you imagine, convincing him, is there a question about him declaring for the draft? There's guys like him. There's a handful of them that you need to convince to take that free year and come back next year.
Yeah, and Mike, another concern that's coming up in the chat right now, more on Twitter, but in the chat, because we have a question here. Mike, who do you think is going to opt out if anybody opts out? I mean, it's a question. Maybe we'll table that and see, because I would want to wait. But we have a question from Doug DiBiase on Twitter. He says, Ask Mike, #Ask Mike, have you seen enough of this team that they can spring an upset or two with all the young talent growing I think it's a good question, Mike. Do you see this young team, even if Myles Brennan is out, because LSU has all that talent that they spark an upset the end of the season, maybe in Alabama or Florida?
Yeah, I mean, what games now are they going to be favored in?
Maybe Arkansas, maybe.
Yeah, but I mean, what wins are on the schedule beyond South Carolina and Arkansas? When you start figuring them in, can you go to College Station and win? Can you, Alabama's a tall order, but they're like everybody, a lot of other schools in the SEC that aren't playing good defense. But we don't know the extent of what's going on with Myles Brennan, and it's one thing to think you can win a shootout and just need your defense to get you one or two more stops that they haven't given you, which could be the difference. To say nothing of red zone play calling and missing field goals.
Right. Mike, a couple more questions from a couple of the fans, and we'll get you on air. Mike Scarborough is our guest from Tigerbait.com. That's Tigerbait.com. Mike, we have one here from Jennifer. She says, ask Mike, people have been talking, and I actually saw this too, is why I think it's a good question, that the emergence of Terrace Marshall could make him go above a draft board and a Jamar Chase. Now, I personally don't think that happens, but the buzz around Terrace Marshall and what he's doing has gotten a lot of praise. How much do you see him climbing up these draft boards right now?
I don't see him going above Chase, but he's flying up the first round.
No question.
LSU's going to have multiple receivers go in the first round.
Mm-hmm.
Who are you taking ahead of Jamar Chase right now, regardless of who's playing or who's not?
I don't know. I have no idea.
I'm not taking anybody above Jamar Chase. And that was one of the debates, we were having in the off season, because I'm one of those people that thinks, particularly when it was the Corona bros were doing their business and trying to see if they could get college football canceled. A guy like Derek Stingley's sitting there and he's got to wait a year, and he can play in the NFL now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
right.
So and I was playing a hypothetical game. Well, what if both of them were NFL eligible? Which between those two would you take? That's a hell of a debate. Which do you take, Chase or Stingley first? And before COVID hit, it's like, you can make the argument that LSU had the best two players in the country. And I say that over Trevor Lawrence. I believe that.
Well, you kind of got me stumped, Mike, because I don't know. Being an offensive guy and knowing how hard it is to score points, I'd probably go with the corner. But that's me. But at the same time, you're saying, hey, no to Jamar Chase. But, man, that's a great point.
And it really depends on what team's drafting where,
Right.
If it's a team that's already got some marquee, cornerbacks, well, then its decision's easy. But yeah.
Yep. Mike, go ahead, sir.
But that just shows you, how stacked LSU has been. But look, there's no denying that defensive front has got to get better, and I just don't know how they do it. Orgeron can talk about simplifying things, but you're still working with what you're working with. I made the joke last week, and I think it went over some of the millennials' heads. But I said, it's like Gene Hackman and Hoosiers. This is your team. You don't have a bunch of Jimmy Chitwood sitting out that all of a sudden could say, I'm ready to play.
Right.
And if Tyler Shelvin all said, okay, I'm ready to opt back in, what kind of shape is he in right now?
I don't know, Mike. I know you hear the rumors that I do, but I heard he's at Little Caesars every day, but I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I don't know. All right. Mike Scarborough was our guest. Mike, as they've seen on the screen all night, and they already know because of all the great work that you do, but give them one more time where they can catch all of your stuff and all the great stuff that you're doing at Tigerbait.com.
That's it. Go to Tigerbait.com if you're an LSU fan. We want to have you as a subscriber. $1 gets you on the site to try us out for a week. And that, actually, it's more than a week, because if you use the code AYS30, Are You Serious AYS 30, you'll get a month for $1. So all your listeners and viewers can get a whole month for $1 by using promo code AYS 30. That's always in effect for your show.
Mike, you're always a legend, and you're always welcome here, man. You killed it as always. We appreciate it. We'll talk again soon.
Hey, anytime. Thanks, man. Talk soon.
Thanks, man.
All right, man. All right.
That's Mike Scarborough from Tigerbait.com. I saw a comment in here from Reginald Cormier. Let me find